I'm RJ Eskow, and we're back on Take Action News. Our guests for this final segment are John and Bonnie Rains, who got a great deal of press coverage over the last week for coming forward and telling the world that they were the burglars who broke into an FBI office in Media, Pennsylvania in the early 1970s and released the documents that told the world about the operation known as Cointelpro. John and Bonnie, thank you for being with us.
Yes.
Glad to be here.
Now, before we start, I'm sure you've been asked and answered the same questions over and over in the last week, and there'll probably be some of that on this segment too. But I just wanted to start by telling you something, which is that when I first read your story, and the two of you had small children at home at the time that this burglary took place, so you were looking at the very real possibility of a long incarceration if you were caught. And I know you've been criticized by some on the right who have said that it was irresponsible to run that risk with small children. And I just want to tell you what my reaction was when I read that part of your story, which was I was deeply moved, almost to tears, at the idea that the two of you cared so much about the society that your children would grow up in, that you were willing to be separated from them if necessary during their childhood years. So I just wanted to tell you that I respect you, I admire you, and I saw that as a sign of self-sacrifice and nothing more. So thank you for your service. So, and now on to the questions, which is you did this because you felt you were the only ones who could do it. You felt you were the only ones who would do it, and what specifically did you think you were going to accomplish?
Well, I think it's important for this generation to realize the massive power of J. Edgar Hoover. He was more powerful than presidents. Presidents would last at most 8 years. He ran the FBI for almost 5 decades, and the FBI under J. Edgar Hoover was a mirror image of his own biases as to what constituted legitimate activity and what was un-American activity. Nobody in Washington was going to hold that gentleman accountable. They were all either enamored of him or they were terrified of him. And presidents were intimidated. He had his special files that he let everybody know that whatever private activities they might be embarrassed by, he had that all on file. So we faced a situation where an immensely powerful institution in Washington, investigative institution that was powerful in the country, was totally out of control of any supervision. And it was under those conditions that some of us decided that we needed to form a independent citizens commission to investigate the FBI.
And this was part of your investigation, in other words. Now, how likely did you consider it that you would be caught and imprisoned for this activity?
Well, we were not reckless, and we were a small group of 8 who were all very. We were a tight-knit group, and we had similar values, and we were going to proceed with the plans very, very carefully and strategically, and we weren't going to attempt to do it until we thought that we had a very, very good chance of succeeding and not being caught.
And at what point did you look at the material you'd acquired and say to yourselves, "Oh my God, we've hit pay dirt here"?
Go ahead, John.
Oh well, it was the morning of the 9th, the morning of day 8 when we started the process, and we started sorting the files that we had, almost 1,000 files altogether, into the criminal files, legitimate criminal files, about 40%, and then those that were clearly political in intent, and that was about 60%. And we set aside the criminals. We weren't going to do anything with those files. We started sorting through the political files, and it wasn't more than half an hour into that process, but all of a sudden somebody said, "Oh, look here," and we all ran over there. There we were at different tables sorting these, and here was the file, the famous file actually, that was sent to Hoover by somebody in the FBI saying that the whole purpose of their intensive surveillance was to, and here I quote, was to increase the paranoia endemic in these kind of groups. I continue the quote directly, and have them think that there is an FBI agent behind every mailbox, end quote. When we had that one, we knew that we nailed them, because this was not surveillance. This was the attempt to use surveillance, massive surveillance, infiltrators, and so on, to take the voice of dissent away from dissent. It was intimidation. That was the purpose.
And for our younger listeners who might not know the term, your discovery revealed Cointelpro in just 30 seconds or so, I guess. Tell them what Cointelpro was.
Well, it was a long-ranging. It began, I think, in 1956 as a major activity of the FBI, and it was targeted to any groups who were dissenting, organizing to protest and dissent. Everything from African American groups who were organizing around civil rights to anti-war protesters, and it was intended to penetrate those groups and take away their voice and their influence. And it was all very, very secret. And it was the first time that the public learned about this extensive, massive initiative of the FBI.
They targeted, Cointelpro targeted the Black Panther Party and essentially destroyed it.
So our listeners many of them might not know the term Cointelpro, but they might know some of the individual stories, the surveillance of the Black Panthers. I don't know if specifically the surveillance, the wiretapping of Martin Luther King was part of this operation, but it was certainly the FBI. Basically the idea that
was
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Cointelpro.
Yes, okay. So now, why you've come forward now at a time when this is very much a part of the national discussion again, because of the revelations we've seen through Edward Snowden, and now, unlike Snowden, you guys, there were no computers then, small computers then. This was paper. You guys were carrying lots of paper.
That's right.
But Edward Snowden has done something very similar. What are your thoughts on Snowden, and did that affect your timing or the way you came out, or how did you react when you heard about Edward Snowden?
Well, it didn't affect the timing. What has happened in this last week was the release of a book by Betty Metzger about the event on March 8th, 1971, and also a documentary called 1971, which has been is telling the same story. It's an interesting coincidence, however, because I think it allows a very serious discussion to be generated around surveillance and invading the privacy of American citizens.
Yeah, both
sorry, go ahead,
the
John.
FBI under Hoover and NSA were very much involved in massive surveillance and the use of massive surveillance, and now, of course, with high technology that wasn't available back for Hoover. But both of them wanted to get away with this off stage without any of us knowing about it. They were, in that sense, a rogue agencies, both the FBI back under Hoover and NSA today, in the sense that the only regulation that NSA is now under is legislation written in 1979, and that was before there were even cell phones. The technology of surveillance and a collection of evidence about our personal lives is just exponentially increased in those years. We need new regulations.
Well, I couldn't agree more. And I guess one of the things that people are saying to discredit Snowden, and potentially might say about you as well, and I'd be interested in your reaction to this, people tend to say, well, who are you? You're just one citizen. Who are you to decide what gets to stay secret and what gets revealed to the public? Isn't that a government function? Aren't you kind of taking that on, assuming that for yourself? What do you say to people who have that kind of reaction?
Well, we do have a Constitution with a First and a Fourth Amendment, so that is directly related to violating people's constitutional rights, and I'm talking about every ordinary citizen. So I think there is an obligation when there is no accountability, and such tactics are being used to try to destroy things that are supposed to be guaranteed under our Constitution in the way of a voice of dissent, then I think that a person has to take on some new responsibility to get to the truth. And that's what we were attempting to do, and it was to reveal the truth of what had been going on for many, many years with no scrutiny from Washington, and really only one way to document what had been going on, and that was to get their own files and documents and have them published in the press.
Snowden and us were trying to do the same thing. That is, simply get information out to the public that would not have gotten out any other way.
No other way.
So that the public could then have the information to begin a new discussion back in 1971 and now today, or in 2014, to begin a discussion about what is the appropriate and inappropriate government activity. We were simply supplying fellow citizens with the information they needed to exercise their ultimate sovereignty, because in a democracy, it's not official folks down in Washington who are the seat of sovereignty. It is we the people.
Well, I couldn't say it better, and I think that's a great place for us to conclude. John and Bonnie Rains, your story is coming out in the movie 1971, in the new book about the FBI burglary in Media, Pennsylvania. And I think it's a great opportunity for people to renew their discussion about our responsibilities and rights in a free society. Thank you so much for being with us on
Sure.
Take Action.
You're very welcome.
Right.
Very welcome.
Right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. That was John and Bonnie Rains talking about what they did when there was a vacuum of power and a vacuum of action to reclaim our society, to share information among all the people. In our own small way, we try to share information here on Take Action News. We look forward to continuing to do that in the months and years to come. Join us next week on Take Action News. I'm RJ Eskow. Thanks so much for being with us.